VOA's Sarah Zaman.
Hello and welcome to Education Destination USA, a Voice of America presentation brought to you in partnership with the George Washington University. Last year, more than 1 million international students came to the United States, and many more are hoping to join them on campuses around this country. But how do you even start to plan for this journey of a lifetime? How do you find the school that's the right fit for you? What do you write in your admissions essay? How do you find the money to study here? Because it's not cheap. And then once you're here, how do you make friends? How do you register for classes? Where do you even live? So lots of big questions, right? Well, today, Voice of America will help answer some of those questions so you can make your education destination USA. In the next 90 minutes, we'll hear from experts in the field of international admissions and advising. We will talk to 2 different sets of panelists and find out what is it that you need to know before you come to the US and after you're here as an international student. We will also take questions from our audience sitting right here at the Jack Morton Auditorium of the GW, and also, most importantly, we will hear from you, our Voice of America viewers and listeners spread around the world. So this is also a Facebook Live event. You can participate in it. Just go to facebook.com/Voice of America. Now is your opportunity to ask questions from experts directly, share your thoughts, your concerns, your worries, your parents' worries about sending you to the US. And now I would love to introduce our panelists to all of us so we can get this conversation started. I would like to welcome Paul White. Paul is the Assistant Dean of Admissions at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in Baltimore, Maryland. Our next panelist is Bianca Schonberg. She's the manager for the Office of International Student Services and Study Abroad at Houston Community College in Houston, Texas. And last but of course not the least, Doug Shaw. Douglas Shaw is actually with the George Washington University, so thank you for joining us. And he's the Senior Associate Provost for International Strategy at the George Washington University and also the Assistant Professor of International Affairs. So thank you very much for joining us today. Before we get the conversation started and get all the questions, let's take a quick look at what some of the issues are that a lot of international students say they had to navigate through to come to the United States to study.
I wanted to make sure I was choosing the right university for me, whereas that was rankings, location, weather, all these factors combined together to make sure that I was applying to the correct university that I was going to be happy in for the next 4 years.
The application process is not easy. You have to do lots of, writing your statement of purpose, and you have to articulate your ideas. The standardized tests are also, some sort of a challenge. There is also the GRE, which is really, it needs lots of time studying, and it is one of the challenges that one might face.
I think writing my essays was one of the most difficult parts. The language used in higher education institutions like GW is far more complex, and I wanted to make sure that I was using the language they were looking for.
So I choose to trust the agency. If I have a second choice, I won't choose them. I maybe do more research on those universities that I am going to apply for.
For me personally, I had to wait 10 months to get my visa. They accept your visa or reject it, or they tell you like, oh, wait. And there is no known duration for the wait.
I think with the visa process, it all begins with the response time from students. What we encourage our students to do, and specifically our international students, is that once they receive the admit letter, they need to start the visa process immediately. Because there is a backlog in terms of applying for the visa and going through the security clearance protocol, and then also receiving their actual visa to study in the United States. We're looking for unique characteristics and qualities, right? So we do apply a holistic lens to our review process, which means that every student that applies to GW is read by a first counselor and then a second counselor, and then goes through a committee process.
Right, so we saw what international students had to manage, had to navigate through to get here. Doug, I would like to start with you. I know at the beginning of the program I said that more than 1 million students are here right now from around the world. And then you have these students who talk about the difficulties of this process, but there are a lot of students who feel that it's a very daunting idea to come to the U.S. They want to come here to study, but they think that it's going to be very difficult. Is it difficult to get admission in a college or university in the U.S.?
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you so much for being here. We're delighted at the George Washington University to have the opportunity to partner with the Voice of America on this important event, and also more broadly with the State Department to welcome many international students, 4,206 here at the George Washington University studying now. I think the transition to college is challenging for lots of folks. In my case, I came from Anchorage, Alaska, down to Washington, D.C. to study. And that was a long distance, and there were some cultural differences. Some folks have greater challenges in that way because they're coming from longer distances and may face language barriers and so forth that they need to embrace to succeed. But many U.S. institutions are welcoming to people from all over the world. We certainly are. We have made an objective of our strategic plan to actually increase the number and percentage of international students we're welcoming here on campus at GW.
Mm-hmm. Paul, I want to ask you this. I know you're right now with the School of Medicine at Johns Hopkins, but you've also dealt with non-med school admissions.
That's correct.
When a student considers this idea that I would like to go to the U.S. to study, even before they start their search for the right school, are there a couple of things that they need to keep in mind?
Well, yes. If they wish to come to the U.S., they have to know that the system is going to be a little different, at least on the undergraduate level. For instance, some students will be applying from countries where they will have the A levels and the O levels, for instance, and they have to apply to the colleges and universities that will know how to interpret the A levels and O levels. As far as medical school, if they're applying to a U.S. medical school, some U.S. medical schools, both public and private, do not accept foreign transcripts. Mm-hmm. Some may even say, we don't accept international students. Hopkins is fortunate in that we are able to accept international students and provide financial aid to international students, but they do have additional steps. For instance, while we will accept international transcripts, we require at least 1 year of additional studies in the U.S. to be fully eligible for admission.
Mm-hmm. When we think about studying in the U.S., most students think of 4-year programs, but community colleges are actually 2-year programs. Bianca, tell our audience a little bit about why they should consider community colleges as the first step.
Absolutely, and thank you for inviting me here. Community colleges are a great option for international students, prospective students. Many times students may not have the English language ability to begin at a 4-year university, or they may need time in order to get acclimated to life in the United States. The community college is a great option. It is also very, very affordable. Many times the first 2 years at a traditional 4-year university, you're doing just basic courses. That can happen at the community college level at a much lower cost. And then after 2 years, international students are then able to transfer to the 4-year university of their choice.
So while we're having this conversation here, as I mentioned, our online audience can participate. Voice of America, as our viewers and listeners know, has very strong roots in the communities that it serves. So we have also been able to take video questions that people sent us from various parts of the world. So right now, I would like to take that opportunity and share one of those questions with our audience. Let's see what the question is.
I have acceptance letter from Arkansas University. I would like to know, after the Trump executive order, are Iranians allowed to come to the United States?
A lot of students have, this student is from Iran, but there are students from other countries too who worry what their visa situation would be like, and nobody wants to invest so much money in the process of applying and then be held back at the last minute. So Doug, if you can tell all those students like Ehsan, what are the limitations or what are the restrictions they might end up facing because of the immigration issues?
So here in Washington, D.C., we've been working very actively to understand the changing immigration context and to be sure that we're ready to support our students. And as we understand our context right now, students are able to apply as they have been, and we're able to help them get here. And we are continuously observing the sort of practice that the U.S. government is undertaking to process visas and working to better understand how to serve our students and to make the transition to university in the United States easy and comfortable for them.
If a student's visa application is stuck, or if it's getting too long for them to hear from the embassy, can the university help? Can it intervene?
Well, that's perhaps one of the other panelists could give a better answer.
Okay. So, Paul, if you do universities, is it even normal for a university to directly communicate with the embassy on behalf of any student?
In my experience, that isn't the case.
Okay, that is not the case. Okay.
But, you know, there are other panelists who will come later who may be able to speak directly to that. I know we've accepted students who've run into some visa issues, and we're communicating directly with the student, not with the embassy.
Okay. So when students are thinking about coming to the U.S. to study, the first question generally is, okay, where do I go? Which school do I pick? And a lot of times students look at rankings of the universities. They look at the town that they might have some family nearby. So Paul, in fact, Paul, I would start with you on this question. How can a student narrow down their search? Because U.S. is a huge country, lots and lots of schools to pick from. What should be some of the things that a student should look at if they want to narrow down their search?
Well, I would go to the institution's websites where they think they might be interested and look to see if they've had international students, number one, and if they've had students from that country matriculate at the institution, and then look at the requirements, because obviously if institutions like GW, like Hopkins, have experience taking students from that country, then it's going to be a little easier for them in terms of communicating information about their own institution back in their home country to either the undergraduate program or in some cases the graduate program. Yeah. So they should definitely do a website search and then try to find students who actually are from the country who they may be able to communicate with.
And this is a very general question. Google is everybody's best friend these days. You go online, you look for universities. How can a student even tell if this school is real or fake? Just by looking at their website. Are there any signs to look for?
Well, I'd surface one thought, which would be my answer to the last question as well. Engaging the university's website to identify faculty members who have expertise and research interests that align with prospective students' interests is a great way to understand how you might fit into a university community. In addition to the programmatic support we can offer to all students, and particularly international students, that faculty fit is a really important consideration.
But in terms of it being an actual institution, we tell our students, regardless of whether they're international or U.S. citizens, we accept students who are from accredited institutions, so we usually direct them to the ACE, the American Council on Education, for a list of accredited institutions in the U.S.
So American Council on Education is a website that you can go to and see which universities and colleges are listed over there, because the last thing, again, you want to do is send money for application and other items to a university that does not really exist. So I will take this opportunity to connect with our social media audience. We have been receiving some questions on our Facebook page and through Twitter. So let's take a look at one of those questions and see what our friends from overseas want to know. So the question is here, and it's from Mufazi in Bangladesh, and they want to know, am I able to apply for a master's degree program in the U.S. if I'm a working professional? So Bianca, I'll let you take that question.
Absolutely. Even at the community college level, we have people who have master's degrees from their home country who come over because they want to study in a certain area or they want to have training in a certain industry. So absolutely. Professionals from all over the world can apply to go to school in the United States.
And in terms of the school size, should that really matter if it's a big school, if it's a small school? When you're overseas, you hear names of big universities, but is that the best bet, or is it okay also for international students to look at smaller institutions?
Well, I think it's perfectly okay for international students to look at small institutions. In fact, in my 17 years of doing undergraduate admissions, I worked at 2 small liberal arts colleges with rather robust international populations. And that was partly because we had a dean of admissions who believed in accepting international students and would travel abroad himself. And the only issue is to make sure the student was familiar with the area, because we were in a semi-rural community in upstate New York, but we certainly were interested in international students because they brought another dimension to the college. So I think as long as there's a community there, the student should be fine.
And before I move to a question from an audience member, I just want to ask this quick question. Students look at rankings, yes, but in some cases, the university has one ranking, but a particular program may have a better or worse ranking. When looking at rankings, what should a student focus on, Doug?
Well, I would really encourage all students to look very carefully at the particular program that they're interested in, and not only how it ranks, but who's teaching there? What are they researching? Is this the right fit for your interests? That, to me, is very important, getting the right fit. As Paul mentioned, if you're not comfortable in a big city, GW might be not the choice for you, but if you are interested in being in the center of a global city, then GW might be better than it would be for another person. So fit is very important.
Great. So at this time, we will take a question from an audience member. If you can introduce yourself, please, and then ask your question.
Hi, my name is Q, and I'm a master's student studying information systems at GWSB. And I have a question for Mr. White. Actually, it's for my brother, and he's a pre-med student, and he's been applying for med schools for 3 years. He has a very high percentile MCAT. He has a magna cum laude in biology, of course, and he interviewed to UC Davis, UW Emory, Georgetown for this semester, and it seems like it's getting harder and harder to get admitted, particularly for international students. So as the admissions expert, what do you see from international students? What do you expect? What do you expect for them to have, like abilities, and to what extent does the immigration status matters in the admission process?
Well, thank you for your question. I'm fortunate in that I'm at an institution that gladly accepts international students. But as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, we do require that they have at least a year of additional studies in the U.S. But we will accept international, and we will also provide financial aid to them. Not every institution is able to do that. They may not have the budget for international students, so that may be one of the stumbling blocks for their accepting them. But in terms of what we look for any student, we use a holistic review process in choosing our students, and that means that they can't just have great MCAT scores or GPA, or if they're applying for undergrad, they can't just have great SAT or ACT scores. We are trying to create a community, and we need people who are going to populate that community with their talents. So we expect that everyone will do well academically, but what else will you do? And in terms of medical school, and you say your friend is interested in medical school, why MD? And why patient care? That's extremely important to medical schools.
Mm-hmm. So my next question is actually for all of you, and that's about students making themselves appealing to universities, because just as our audience member asked, great scores, still having a difficult time coming to the U.S. What can a student do in their academic career and in terms of their extracurricular activities that would make them stand out when their application arrives here? Bianca, I'll start with you.
So we're a little bit different at the community college level. We're open admission. But students use that opportunity to create the portfolio for the universities. So while they're there, they're making sure that they're involved in extracurricular activities. They're making sure that they're doing internships on campus and off campus, that they're working with the industry of their choice, that they're already starting to do research with faculty members at universities so then they can prepare themselves for the admission process.
Doug?
Well, so as Paul observed, so we're looking to build a community, and we need all sorts of folks in it. but particularly folks that imagine themselves to be highly competitive, that are working in a variety of ways. One thing that might be more vivid for some American students than some international students is service and leadership, and the expression of those things in your high school or undergrad time as a mechanism to communicate who you are to us and how you'll fit in and contribute to our community.
Paul?
I would agree with everything Doug said. I just came back from visiting an institution in China, which I won't name at this time, and they are creating a medical school. And they said, Paul, what should we be doing? What should we be looking for? And I talked about the subjective skills, the soft skills that are required to be a physician, not just the numbers. And it will be interesting because unlike other medical schools in China, they will be doing interviews, which is highly, highly unusual, and one-on-one interviews. And so they'll be looking for students who are able to express themselves. So your communication skills are going to be of utmost importance there. The same is true here, and I think that's where some of the students sometimes stumble. Medical schools in the U.S. still require interviews, which I'm delighted that they are, because oftentimes we will bring in someone with a 4.0 and a top MCAT score, and you say, I don't want this person near a patient. Okay. So.
How much?
Not too often. Fortunately, that doesn't happen.
That's all good for everyone, you know.
Yes,
I'm not that makes us feel better.
For anyone.
It makes us feel safer.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, you've talked about what a student can do to make themselves impressive. What about just the ability to write in English in a very articulate manner? Because there are students in China and in so many other parts of the world whose English skills are not up to par with American students. So how important is grammar in that admissions essay, and how important is your ability to write in good English? Does that really hold some students back from admission, or are you forgiving?
So with us, that's what we do. We're good at the community college level, is that we have English language programs. We talk about grammar, American diction. So we prepare those students who may not be ready at that point for the university. So they're ready when it's time for them to actually apply. They're able to actually craft a well put together essay as well as go through interviews. So again, at the community college level, we are there to give that foundation, prepare them to transfer on into the university level.
But Doug, what about those who are coming directly from overseas and their first stop would be a 4-year program?
Well, so we're going to evaluate folks' English skills, and that's going to be a necessary element of their preparation. We do offer English for academic purposes here on campus to help support people once they're here, but it's definitely part of the evaluation is that our language of instruction is in English, and we need folks to be able to participate.
Right.
Well, and let me just add, they will have to take the SAT or the ACT in English, and they'll have to take the TOEFL, the test of English as a foreign language, if their first language is not English.
Right, and that's part of the list of tests that they have to take that's on the website for most international programs. We have one more question from an audience member. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, every panelist, for your suggestion. My name is Olivia. I come from China. Currently, I'm a graduate student focused on the business analytics in business school. So I have some questions for you. Actually, I come to America 1 year ago with admission, and I actually hope to launch my new life in America. However, I found some difficulties when I come here that I noticed most of students, when they come to America for the first time, especially after 20 years old, they tend to stay in the same friend circle that is pretty similar to their previous life. For example, I'm a Chinese. I may want to hang out with Chinese and eating Chinese food and watching Chinese movies. So actually, this makes us very hard to get a chance to know local life and other international students. So I have two questions for this fact. The first question is that how do you think that the higher educational institution, they can do something to encourage students to step out their comfort zone and try to know the real U.S. society? And the second question is that how do you think as a students we can do something to help ourselves and help us better fit into the U.S. life? Thank you.
That's actually a great question for our second panel, but I will let you take this question. How can students integrate themselves better on the campus community here?
Well, I think having an insular life in grad school is a pretty common problem.
Yeah.
When I was working on my PhD, there were several moments that were pretty inwardly focused. But universities can help by building out programming, and we're working to do that here at GW that'll engage international students particularly as a bridge to help them to communicate with their peers. But in terms of what international students can do themselves, I'd emphasize that the United States, Washington, D.C. in particular, a very outgoing place, a place where you're expected to put yourself forward and to get out there and shake hands with people and meet them. And that's the sort of our cultural norm. And I would encourage you to embrace it while you're here as a way to get to know us better.
And just as I mentioned in this program, this is also a Facebook Live event, and the great thing is that we are getting questions from our online audience. Let's take a look at a question that we received through social media. The question is, what is the right age for going to study in the U.S.? And is there an age limit for a student visa? And that's a question from Fawzia, who lives in Pakistan. So any age limit, Bianca?
So actually at the community colleges, for many of them, it's as long as you have a high school diploma, you are eligible to come into the United States. You also have to be aware that there are high schools here in the United States that have admission for international students as well. So there's not actually an age limit. It depends on the institution.
Mm-hmm. So time is flying by, but I want to get a couple of questions in here. One of the questions is about advising services. There are some organizations that are doing great work overseas, recruiting students. Education USA is one of those. It has 400 centers around the world. And then U.S. embassies and consulates also have education wings that students can go to. But then there are countries, and I know that a lot of our online audience would relate to that, where you see people who open up a shop in a mall and it says, you know, we'll help you get a visa, we'll help communicate with the university on your behalf. You give us this amount of money, we'll ensure a visa and an admission. Is that a bad idea? Is that a ripoff, or can they actually help?
I don't have a great deal of experience with those organizations. They sometimes write to our email account, and I will tell you what I tell anyone. We communicate with the applicant, not with a third-party vendor, because we can't really verify the quality of their product, what they're offering you. So I rarely deal with vendors like that.
So now you know, it's better to talk directly to the university instead of talking to any third party, because the university will welcome you here. And at this moment, I would like to thank our panelists for answering a lot of the very basic and important questions. We will shortly bring another set of panelists, and we'll talk about what it is that you need to know once you are here, how your cultural adjustment is going to be made easier by the university. So stay with us.
Everybody wants to come to America, because it's a great place.
I never really planned on coming to the U.S. However, in my junior year of high school, I heard about this program called the African Leadership Academy in South Africa.
Well, I think BU here provides lots of opportunities, like our advisors. They gave us very helpful advice for class registration.
Among all international students in the U.S., 32% come from China, 16% from India, 6% from Saudi Arabia, and 6% from South Korea. Only 2% come from Mexico, and 3% from Canada.
I really want to experience different culture, so I decided to for college I'm gonna study abroad. And the reason why here is because I think U.S. Commonly people think U.S. has best high level education.
I have my undergrad in finance major. U.S. may have more opportunity in terms of employment, in terms of the breadth and depth that you can learn in this subject matter.
The education system in general is better than my own country, not generally in terms of curriculum, but I'll say in terms of option and in terms of the friendliness that I'm talking about.
1 in 3 international students studies in California, New York, or Texas.
This is Education Destination USA, a Voice of America presentation brought to you in partnership with the George Washington University. So just a few minutes ago, we talked about the admissions process, some basic things that you need to know to make yourself attractive to a university here and also find the right fit for you. But once you come here, that's when it gets real. And no matter how many American movies and TV shows you've seen, how many songs you know, or how many fast food restaurants you've been to, fact is, once you get to the United States, some things will feel different. And on top of that, you're not going to have your parents or friends here to help you through this process. So in this part of our program, we're going to talk about the inevitable culture shock and what universities and colleges in America are doing to help ease that transition and make your new life in the U.S. a bit better and easier. At this point, I would like to welcome our panelists. First up is Sam Brown, Director of International Student and Scholar Services at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. Next up, Raj Bhargava, Startup Mentor and Stanford Pre-Collegiate Educator. Karen Zufanti-Pabon, Director of the Slater International Center at Wellesley College in Massachusetts. And last but not the least, Dr. James Dorsett. He's the Director at the Office of International Students and Scholars at Michigan State University in East Lansing. Welcome everyone to Education Destination. So once a student gets here, even before that, they need to kind of mentally prepare themselves for this. Raj, I'll start with you because you mentor a lot of high school students overseas. What is it that a student should keep in mind to mentally prepare themselves?
Thank you, Sarah, and it's great to be part of this panel. Like many of you who are already here or who are aspiring to be here, I came here as an international student too. And one of the things I would say, like Sarah mentioned, it's obvious when you come here, you are going to be facing many challenges and many changes. You know, simple things like food. You leave your friends and family behind maybe. Language is different. So one of the things I would like to emphasize is maybe think about your mindset. Are you going to have an open mindset or a closed mindset? With a closed mindset, many a time, every change looks like an obstacle. It pulls you down. With an open mindset, every change is a learning opportunity. It's an interesting way to think about how other people view about different issues and learning from that. So for me, when I came here in India, I had grown up I used to live my home, even for my college education. When I came here, I was completely independent. Cooking, laundry, everything really. And initially it was really overwhelming. But that is a very important life skill I learned, not just for my personal life, but even for my professional life. And when I became an entrepreneur and I started companies, that was a very useful skill to have.
So an open mind and the ability to make instant noodles. Those two things will get you a long way. Sam, I would like to ask you this. When students come over here, the environment is going to be different, especially the classroom environment. Over here, teachers really collaborate with you, they talk to you, which is really good. But when students come from overseas, the thing that's on their mind is to get really good grades. Do universities, and how do in fact universities help students if they're struggling with their grades because there is just a huge transition to deal with and they're dealing with life in a way that they've never had to do before? So if you see falling grades, is that a problem, or are you going to get kicked out as a student, or are you going to get help?
That's a great question. I think every university, every institution has support services that can help. And there is always a process where it's not going to be one semester that kicks you out with poor grades. And it might take several semesters. On our campus, you have a chance where you go on to warning and then probation, and they work with you to try and help you get back into the good graces academically. I do think that one of the biggest pieces of advice for international students and domestic students alike is, as early as you can, if you start to notice that there's a challenge or that you're not getting the grade you'd like, or you're struggling in a class or several courses, ask for the help up front. And that's sometimes a hard thing, I think, to admit that it's a challenge. But the earlier you can do it, the more you can get support, and hopefully earlier on you can change the course as opposed to having to, after the fact, try and fix it.
And when students come here, they actually get student orientation programs. Karen, I want to ask you, when students come here, what are some of the first things that they are exposed to in the first few days of orientation programs?
So thank you. I'm very excited to be here today representing Wellesley College, a small liberal arts college for women who make a difference in the world. And I think that one of the most important programs that we provide for our international students is our orientation program. We have a 3-day or 2-day program, depending on the year, where international students arrive early on campus. So they have an opportunity to get settled, to begin to make connections, to begin to learn what the resources are on campus and where they can reach out to for help. We provide them with sessions on how to manage finances, how to get a cell phone, how to get employment in the United States if they're thinking about getting an internship or working after they graduate. We also have a very special session for what we call our third culture kids, because we're seeing more and more that we're bringing in international students that are not in the typical non-immigrant visa category of international student, but the broader umbrella of international student that includes our permanent residents, our dual citizens, or even our U.S. citizens who have lived abroad and are very unfamiliar with life in the United States. Another session we provide during that orientation is the U.S. classroom, where we talk about the differences of how a U.S. classroom may be more interactive. You may have a much more informal relationship with your faculty member, even maybe calling your faculty member by their first name, which is very difficult for some cultures to grasp and understand. So academic integrity and honesty, which is different across cultures too. So a variety of these types of programs focused on things that might be different for the international student.
James, in terms of English language ability, we talked about in that process during admissions, but once they're here, they can get help in improving their English. But tell us a little bit about whether that English language, those classes, those programs, do they go parallel to the classes that you can register for, or do you first have to clear and get to a certain level of proficiency in English, and then you're allowed to register for your classes? So is there going to be a delay before I can start my education here?
Well, it all depends on what the student's initial proficiency is. As was discussed somewhat with the first panel, students generally will take a standardized test of English proficiency, and if they reach that level, then they're admitted and able to start in their academic programs. But if they are not, if they're admitted academically but don't have that English proficiency, it is still possible for them to come to the United States and come to the university in most cases that they will be attending, but take those concentrated English proficiency courses on campus. Also, even if a student has the requisite English proficiency, it is often helpful for them to find other ways to enhance their English proficiency. So through English conversation programs, or really reaching out of their comfort zone, as one of the students in the earlier panel asked about, and really getting to know Americans. So there's some very specific standard ways to do it, and then things that the students can take as their own initiative.
All right, so at this moment, we can take a look at a couple of the issues that international students say they had to deal with and things that they found challenging once they came to the U.S. So let's take a look at what they had to say.
The biggest cultural shock for me was the way classes were taught, the use of tools like Blackboard, the way that assignments were asked to be handed into the professor.
In America, communication is very important. How do you communicate with people, how you interact with them? You really got to be very active personally and reach out and sort of, sell yourself as a person to be able to get opportunities and connections.
They have a different even measuring and height, items instead of the one that we have. I learned how people, live their life here.
Before I came here, I think my English is not very well, but it's medium leveled. But when I when I come over with this barrier, I'm a little bit upset and also feel bad because I think, oh, I'm nothing.
If you go to certain places, you try to adapt to their culture in a way that doesn't affect your personality. So when you come here, of course I tried new sport. Of course I tried new things I had never tried before.
I decided to join the Model UN of the university, and I had the opportunity to be vice chair for a committee in the Model UN. I did know there needed to be an effort from me in order to connect with domestic students, so I decided to do it through my enrollment in student organizations and on-campus events.
There's some tension between the Middle East and the United States, and I tried to build bridges instead of walls. So I felt of myself as an ambassador to my country and to my religion and to my region in general, and also ambassador of the United States in order to build the bridges and build, people-to-people kind of exchanges.
I believe in the era of technology, the culture shock is not as bad as it used to be. So I was on Twitter, on Facebook, I browse the internet, I read about all other countries because I'm curious guy. So it wasn't hard on me, it wasn't.
What I always tell students is that put yourself out there. When you arrive here for orientation, go and introduce yourself to someone, a stranger, and start a conversation. I think what most of them, all of them will find is that everyone that arrives on a college campus, they all arrive with the same level of anxiety, the same level of insecurity because they're away from home for the first time.
Aspect also of coming to the U.S. and coming to this new environment. We heard a little bit about the fact that students take part in different activities, join organizations, but we also got this question from our audience, and before we had this panel put together, we also had the chance to talk to international students, and a lot of them said that as a graduate student, they kind of feel more isolated. As an undergraduate student, they still have a chance to meet other students. So graduate students feel more isolated. And number two, students also complained that when they are part of an international student organization, that they feel that automatically there's more of a space created a gulf created between them and other American students, because they feel that then they tend to just hang around with other international students. So James, if you can tell us a little bit about how much effort your university is making, and universities tend to make in general, to connect international student organization with other on-campus organizations and activities.
Well, one of the things that is important is that international student organizations are, that they work to coordinate themselves with the greater structure that is within a campus. So on our campus and in many campuses, they can be part of a structure either with that is sponsored by the undergraduate student government or a graduate student government. Also, sometimes international organizations can kind of work together under the umbrella of an international student organization that works to support all of them and provide better support and communication and liaison with the greater administration and the university, so that those organizations, the international student organizations, are not just seen as organizations solely for international students, but they have a role to play in enhancing the diversity of that particular campus and providing a great opportunity for Americans to get involved in as well.
Mm-hmm. Raj, would you like to add anything to just this part, that a shy student, what should a shy student do?
Yeah, this is a really good question and a very practical question. I think it's really important to be authentic. So think about what are your strengths, what is your heritage, what are your learning goals, and even recognize your fears. And like we heard on one of the video sections, US is a big country, and a lot of students who are coming from the US, they are traveling a long distance, and they're going through a lot of change too. So the university is a very open environment, and getting in, based on your strengths and your interests. So for example, you're really interested in sports or music or cooking. Get involved with people through these activities. And I went back to school 2 years ago, and I took an acting class. And taking improv and acting, that's really a good way to really get involved and get comfortable with things that you're not used to.
So get involved in things that you enjoy and put yourself out there. When you come to the United States, it's not just going to be the culture that's different. Rules and regulations and laws are also going to be different, and compliance is very, very important. Karen, if you can tell us a little bit about what are some, problems that students can run into in terms of compliance. What is it that they really need to ensure is on track so their visa is not revoked or they don't get into any other kind of trouble?
Well, it's very interesting. As an international student advisor, you kind of have two roles. You are the person that helps the student and the college stay in compliance, but at the same time, you're the advisor, the mentor, the person who will always be there to listen. So you're playing those two roles at the same time. So the way I look at it is I would like to provide the student with the tools to understand the very complex immigration regulations that they face here in the United States and to work within the structure of those regulations. So I'm not going to do everything for them, but what I'm going to do is provide them with the rules and the guidelines and then help them. For example, we have a lot of students that are interested immediately to get an internship or to get employment when they graduate. So how can they do that? It can even come up like, what is employment? If I dog walk for my professor while he's on vacation, that's not really employment. That's just, informal. But it is employment. You're getting compensation for services rendered. So that can later be an issue that comes up immigration-wise that you don't want to deter you from any future plans you have with your immigration status. So educating the students about what is employment, what you can do. You can still work, but what you need to do to get the proper employment for the job that you want to do. Another thing is also not only educating the student, but educating the academic advisors who work with the students about being full-time. That's another regulation that international students have to follow, is being full-time. So you can't just drop a course if you're not doing well in it or if you're not going to get an A in it, because it could potentially affect your immigration status. So those are things that you need to think about, and you need to make sure that the student is aware of as they're going to try to achieve their academic success at your college.
All right. Let's go to our social media community and find out what people are asking over there. So we have a question from Indonesia, and Kamala wants to know, I'm a Muslim student who wears a hijab. Will I be allowed to study in the United States? Sam.
Absolutely. And one of the nice things is I truly believe that international students bring such value and enrichment to this country and to our institutions. And part of that is teaching all students and those around us about who you are. I appreciated the student in the video who talked about being an ambassador. And while there might be some questions and some misunderstandings or people that don't quite understand what culture you come from or perhaps a religious background, you have an opportunity to share what that is. And for the most part, I believe that students are open to that. They want to know, and they will accept what you bring. And so absolutely, you'd be allowed to study in the United States. Most campuses, I know our campus provides prayer rooms and places where students of different faiths can go and can participate in their religious practices. And I think you find that across the board in most institutions.
Right. In fact, that is also a question that we get a lot from people, that in terms of their dietary restrictions and their religious observation and in terms of their religious holidays, would universities accommodate that? So, James, if you can talk a little bit about university accommodating dietary restrictions and who you want to live with or who you don't want to live with as your roommate.
Well, one of the things that is really important is that if the student has particular issues or things that are important to them, or they have religious or dietary issues or are allergic to certain things, that information is put forward in their housing application or in their in getting that information to the people who handle the dining facilities, because the folks who handle the dining particularly, they want to be as helpful to all the students as they can. Many of them will have an advisory board of students particularly including or trying very much so to include international students so that they can do what they can within their budgetary restrictions and how much space they have to prepare the food, that they can accommodate dietary restrictions or restrictions based on religious needs. And so, so in general, in terms of food, that is something that if a student is not finding the right food that they need to let the officials know those things right away, and they will try to do as best they can to accommodate those. As far as housing, it all depends on what the policies of that particular institution are as to how much space they have, how much they can make changes for students, or how much initially they can ask for particular roommates. At my particular institution, students can, if they know who they want to room with up front, they can make those arrangements right away as part of their process. So technology is really enhancing that ability on most campuses. So those are things that certainly the students should try to get as much information about those aspects of the process.
So in terms of their basic needs, students should feel free to express themselves and to bring their needs and concerns to you. Let's take a look at one of the video questions that we have received from overseas, because the good thing is we have been able to connect with people from all over the world, and we have some really important questions. So let's move on to a videotape question.
A number of students would like to get into prestigious schools, and I believe they work very hard to achieve that goal. I would like to know whether they get a sense of achievement and satisfaction when they attend those highly respected schools.
Leagues are coveted by all students. Everybody wants to go to one of those schools. So one question is, how can a student realistically assess their chances of going to one of these big names, top schools? And also, is it really worth it? Spending all that money, spending all that energy, would they really get a sense of achievement? Sam?
I think it's unique from student to student, and I do think that the research you can do on the front end is obviously the way to start with that. And talking to other students, looking at websites, some of the panelists from before talked about that. It's competitive, but there's always opportunity, and unless you try, you'll never know. I do think, from my perspective, students who go to a prestigious university do have a sense of value from that prestigious institution. And I also think one of the values that comes from that is the employment side afterwards. Depending on how highly ranked your program is, even within a university, can determine the potential employment opportunities that you have afterwards. And so a lot of different enrichment and value can come from that, but it depends a lot on the student and what they're specifically looking for.
Karen, you talked about employment actually briefly in terms of the compliance issues. A lot of students, when they come here, they want to supplement their income really quickly. They want to be able to have some extra cash in their pocket. Is off-campus employment off limits, or is it something that the university can work with them? And should students really be worried about their finances or job as the first thing?
So that's a great question, because technically when you apply to come to the United States, whether you're on a J or an F visa as a student, you need to actually show up front that you have enough financial support for your stay while you're a student. So there should be no need to work, no financial need to work. So that's one of the first steps that you need to do to get the immigration document to actually come here. But then when you get here, you will have the opportunity in most cases to work on campus up to 20 hours per week during the school year and full-time during vacation periods. If you're in valid status and you're in at least not an English language program. And then when you graduate, you'll have the opportunity to apply for a period of what's called practical training, which must be done in your major field of study. So the idea is that you take what you've learned in the classroom and get an opportunity to practice it while you're in the United States. And then there's one other type of employment that you can do, which a lot of students use for internship. It's called curricular practical training. And that's, again, related to your major. So a lot of this is it's interesting because Americans will always, even US-based advisors will say, oh, major major in whatever your heart tells you to, follow your heart. But for international students, what you major in can be an important thing determining your future, because if you major in a field like, let's say, I don't know.
Library sciences.
Yes, so then you're limited to working in the library sciences field. Right at Wellesley, for example, you start off, they're all liberal arts, so you have a broad spectrum to look for employment. But there's definitely opportunities to work. But it's not so much to earn money, it's more to gain experience in your field.
So we have a question from an audience member. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. My name is Joy, and I am a graduate student here at GW studying international education. My two questions for the panelists are, number one, how do you foster an environment where international students feel welcomed, belonged, and safe in the U.S. after the travel ban? And my second question for you is, what are the institutional-wide initiatives to combat xenophobia? Thank you.
So James, we'll start with you.
Well, I think one of the key things in creating a welcoming environment is that it is most helpful that you have the commitment from the upper administration. I know that many institutions, when there was the initial travel ban executive order, there were statements by presidents and provosts and chancellors indicating that their institutions are a welcoming institution. And then maintaining a welcoming environment is something that is not just limited to the international office. Certainly the international office is the place where international students should always feel comfortable and are able to come for advice and support. But it is the responsibility of the whole institution as a learning institution to be a welcoming and supporting place for all students. And so if there are, so our office works particularly with certain departments and colleges to provide them training in intercultural communications and how to work better with international students, and also working with offices of institutional equity and intercultural offices, so that we can do all the things together to enhance the welcoming experience and the intercultural experience of all our students. And as far as some of the other things that can be done, I know that our campus, as well as many institutions, created a "You Are Welcome Here" video that we got a tremendous response. People in our office made a video saying that to the students that they are welcome. We also did a second video that included the president, the provost, the governor of the state, the mayor of East Lansing, and so you have a very vivid and striking commitment from the institution and the surrounding area that says that international students are welcome, and that there is a commitment that we will do our best to support them in whatever way we can.
And international students are an asset to the universities too. Absolutely. And universities do a lot to make their life comfortable and retain them. Right now we have a question from hopefully a prospective international student from overseas. Let's take a look at what they want to find out.
I'm planning to go to a grad school to study computer science. I would like to know how universities select students and what they're looking for in their future students.
Looking for in future students, and I think another important question that a lot of international students have is, are they judged the same way that domestic American students are judged, or is the scale different? So Karen, if you can take that, please.
So every school is different in their admissions process, but at Wellesley, for example, we have a very unique admissions process where we have each application is read by an admissions officer, a faculty member, a staff member, and a student. So we're really looking from all those different perspectives as who's going to be the right fit for Wellesley College. We can look at a bunch of applicants that have 800 SAT scores and they have all A's and incredible recommendations, and we can have a really perfect student, but they may not be the best fit for Wellesley College, and we'll get to see that by each person in the committee putting in their perspective. A lot of times what we do when we're looking at international students is to see who's also going to be successful and thrive at our college, depending on what their characteristics are and what we know the college to be, whether it's going to be very competitive for them, whether they're going to be engaged student leaders, because that's very important for us on our campus. Have they shown in their application that they've been doing community service, that they've had leadership roles in the past. So we're looking at all those different pieces to just make sure that that person is going to be a good fit, but is also going to be a successful person at the college.
And that is regardless of the major that they choose, whether it's science or liberal arts, their personality and their personal achievements and accomplishments matter. Let's take a look at one of the questions that we have received through social media. So the question is from Augustine, and Augustine is from Liberia, and they want to know, if a person wants to study in the US but doesn't have the financial means, how can that person pay for their education? So financial aid is a huge, huge concern for students, and there are different varieties of help that they can get. There are merit-based scholarships, there are need-based scholarships, but then a lot of students also want to know if they can get financial aid. Can you clarify to us, Sam, the difference between financial aid and assistance versus scholarships, and where can students look for those?
Sure, that's a great clarification. Financial aid typically refers more to, oftentimes in the United States at least, government assistance. So there are Pell Grants and student loans that if you're a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, then you can qualify for in certain circumstances. Typically, international students don't qualify for that side of things. However, there are scholarships, as you mentioned. Sometimes there is financial aid or scholarships offered through your specific program. So at an institution, if you're an accounting major, perhaps the accounting program has scholarships. There are outside campus resources often as well from corporations and different entities that can offer scholarships. One of the things we often talk to students about as well, excuse me, is that you can work on campus, as Karen mentioned. In fact, even in that process of proving your financial verification, the on-campus employment is something that can be considered, and they even put on that Form I-20 if you have a job on campus that does contribute. So while you do need to have money, there are ways you can consider looking for it elsewhere, but they are more limited, to be very honest, for international students.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times university websites will say that they don't offer scholarships to undergraduates, or for certain programs they will say we don't have any scholarships. Should that be taken at face value and just be considered a no for an answer, or can a student dig in a little deeper and actually find something? Raj, I see you nodding. What was your experience with this?
I think it also depends on, are you applying to a bachelor's program, a graduate program, and what discipline you're going to study. So for example, if you're applying to a graduate program, there are a lot of research assistantship and teaching assistantship available, right? And so based on what you've done before, based on your interests, you can open up opportunities for yourself. For myself, I actually wrote letters to the professors directly. And out of that, I was able to get 2 research assistantships. So I think international students, you can look at websites and see what is there, but reach out to your friends, research on the internet, and I think it's always good to find other ways, creative ways, besides what is available, like Sam talked about.
I would also add the Institute of International Education actually has a publication on funding in the United States. It's a fairly thick book. There are kind of specific types of scholarships in there, but that's definitely a place you can search. And then also don't just automatically assume there's no financial aid for international students, because, for example, at Wellesley, we do have financial aid for international students.
Right, so to summarize, basically, if the website says there's very limited financial aid, one should not get discouraged. There are still options out there. There's still a little bit of digging that you can do. I did the same thing actually, Raj. The website said they didn't have much, but when you reach out to professors, the good thing is they will respond to you. Most universities and colleges are really, really good with communicating with students. So if you see something on the website that you feel you want to learn more about, you need more clarification on, feel free to communicate with the universities. And at this point, we'll go to one more social media question and see what people want to know. So Hawaii from Switzerland wants to know, is it possible for someone who is a refugee to study in the U.S.? And especially in terms of a 4-year program or a 2-year program, if you're a refugee, can you enter one of those schools, James?
Well, certainly. In general, the universities, they want to get the best students, and they want to have students who are interested and eager to study. And so if the student in general has the academic qualifications, and in this case, if their educational study in their institution that they went to, if they're applying to graduate school, or if their secondary education was not English, they would just have to cover the same type of admissions requirements as any other international student in that regard. Their immigration status would be somewhat different, and that might make the things that they would be able to do, such as employment, somewhat different than a F or a J student, but absolutely as far as meeting academic qualifications, if they have those, and they have the funding through either scholarships or funding that they get from some other sources, they can certainly come to the United States and study.
Sam, does your university consider refugees, or even on humanitarian grounds, not just on academic grounds, but do universities tend to also look at students from a humanitarian perspective?
Absolutely, and I think that adds to the holistic review that we look at when we're looking at student fit, right? We want students who bring different perspectives and have passion about different things, and refugees can often bring a very diverse and wonderful perspective that is valued and needed in the institutions here.
Great, thank you so much. There is so much more to talk about. At this moment, I would like to thank this panel, but we'll also bring our panelists who you listened to in the first 1/3 of our program. So stay with us. We're going to bring everyone back, and any other questions that you may have that you think have remained unanswered, now is the time to send them to us. We'll try to make sure that we get your answers for you today in Education Destination USA.
At the beginning, it was just new, so it was nice because, I mean, my parents are a little strict, so coming here was just like, okay, this is just like, okay, I'm by myself, I'm independent, and it was nice, but then you kind of miss them in a way because you don't have the support you had back home, and sometimes it's hard, but my friends really helped me with that.
Well, language is only the biggest problem was try to understand what they're saying. I'm still practicing now. And the second one, I would say, in terms of academics, I'm a grad student, so I have to do a lot of work, a lot of reading, and do a lot of writings. So sometimes I get frustrated.
International students in the U.S. contributed $35.8 billion to the U.S. economy in 2015.
In Tunisia, we study with the French curriculum, and so and our schedules do not really line up with deadlines here in the U.S. Back home, you don't really get to apply to university. You just finish writing your final exam, and then you get affected to university based on your ranking.
I think it's really important if you know what you want in advance. I know it's it's sort of an advantage that you have a time when you're a freshman, you have time to figure things out. But the reality is, I think, the sooner you know, the better.
Looking for information on how to study in America? You can find information on several websites, among them internationalcollegeboard.org, internationalstudent.com, educationusa.state.gov, and tsol.org.
This is Education Destination USA, and this is a Voice of America presentation brought to you in partnership with the George Washington University. All of our panelists are back So now is the opportunity to just get your questions answered because we all have them here. Some of the questions that we didn't get to ask earlier that I want to bring up are that there are a lot of undergraduate students here who then want to go to graduate school also in the US. And they might not want to stay in the same university that they got their undergraduate degree from. Would a university then help them find good graduate school programs and help them reach out to them, Doug, since this is GW? What is GW's policy on this?
It's not so much a matter of policy as faculty practice, but I think you'll find here and at other American institutions that your undergraduate professors are very interested in your success, and if you make a positive impression on them, they will help you find your place and your way forward toward a career in their discipline particularly.
Mm-hmm. So if you're here and you're thinking about going someplace else for graduate school, you have his word, they will help you do that.
Also in some career education offices, there's a dedicated person there that helps students research graduate programs if you're just an undergraduate university.
Now, a lot of students come from overseas, are coming from countries where schools don't necessarily keep electronic records. And a lot of schools over here ask, that the transcripts be sent directly. So, Sam, I'll ask you this. For students coming from those countries, what kind of help can they get from you? How flexible are schools in the U.S.?
That's a good question, and it depends on the school, I think, a lot. But typically, I believe most people are understanding if it's a situation where it's outside of the control of the student. And you can, at times, get letters and things that will help explain the situation and appeal to the admissions committee and admissions folks. And from my perspective, at least, I think they're willing to listen. And as long as you can show that you really are a compelling applicant and that you have the academic abilities, they're willing to look at you.
So it's okay if a student sends their transcripts directly, it's a printout, it's a photocopy, it's sealed, and they send it to you directly, not that the school is sending it, but the student is sending it. You will still accept them, or most schools would accept it?
I think most would, as long as, I would say there needs to be an explanation with it as to why it's coming. And again, if you can explain that it's outside of your control, that you've petitioned the school, but it's not something you're able to get.
Mm-hmm. And we have a question from our audience here. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Megan Madden. I'm an assistant professor here at George Washington University. Before working as an assistant professor, I worked with international scholarship students. And so this question is about students who are on scholarship who have limited resources while they're on campus. And what type of activities and programs do your institutions provide for them to support them stay on their budgets?
All right.
We have an Office of Financial Aid, and they do a terrific job of instilling financial literacy in all of our students, but especially for the international students. Our budget, for instance, is broken into one for U.S. citizens, domestic applicants and students, and then the international students, because we want to take into consideration that they may want to go home, for instance, during the summer months. But we tried to give as realistic a budget to the students as possible, and then the Financial Aid Office will work with them. We also have a terrific Office of International Students and Scholar Services on all of our campuses. Hopkins has 9 different divisions, as you probably know, including 2 right here in Washington, SAIS, School of Advanced International Studies, and then the Carey School of Business, which also is in Baltimore, and then all the other programs in Baltimore. And the International Student Scholars and Services works with students across all the divisions, particularly for both students and faculty.
So we're getting lots and lots of questions, which is great. For now, we will move on to our social media because, as I mentioned, Voice of America has an awesome Facebook page. Just go to facebook.com/Voice of America. Send us your questions there. You can also tweet at VOA News. The hashtag is StudyInUSA. Let's look at the question that we have received online. So Sammy from Eritrea wants to know, I'm from Eritrea, but I'm pursuing a university degree in France. Can I complete my degree in the U.S.? So James, is that an option, that you are studying in one country, you don't finish it, but you come to a third country, which is not the country of your origin?
Well, that would be just a regular transfer for a student. As far as the university would look at it, it would be not really that much different as if they were coming from another U.S. institution. It's just their documents would be somewhat different and so forth, and their the admissions process would be different because they're not as a domestic student coming from a domestic institution. So, so absolutely they could come, and of course they would need to look at how many credits would transfer as to how much of their degree they would need to complete at the institution they would be coming to.
And next we have a taped question, so let's see what our viewer from overseas wanted to ask.
Is there a special scholarship for women who want to study leadership?
Who want to study leadership. Another question is, are there special scholarships for minorities and for women? So actually, okay, Karen.
I would love to answer that question because we have an incredible program with the MasterCard Foundation where we're partnering with them on bringing women from the African continent who have the potential to be transformative leaders. They're fully funded by the MasterCard Foundation, and they come for the complete 4 years, fully financed, with the idea that they will get this education and return to the continent to then transform, to become women leaders and transform society there. That's one of the programs we have. We also have a summer women's leadership program that we just started this year, where women can come for a short time in the summer to learn about leadership, and then also get a taste for what university is in the United States. Definitely, of course, Wellesley College is going to be specifically looking at women to give them the financial aid and the support that they need to become leaders.
And we have a question on the floor here. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. My name is Nanelle Watomi, and I'm a current graduate student here at GW in the International Education Program. And before that, I also worked in international recruitment. So my question is for all of you. Given the current racial and political climate under this new administration, how are each of you incentivizing students to enroll at your institutions?
So if we can hear briefly from each one of you. Sam, starting with you.
I think, and that's a great question, and it's a challenging time right now for a lot of people and how they feel. I do think that goes back to also what James had talked about, making sure that students know that they're welcome here and that we value them and as individuals and as students and what they bring and contribute. And the more that we can get that message out to say, we want you to be a part of who we are, I think the more comfortable students will feel in that application process and trying to come.
We've done several things. We've done the You Are Welcome Here video that we've have sent out. Our international students at Wellesley actually have a house that's the International Center, that's kind of their second home, and they put together their own special video about the Slater International Center, about the different student orgs that they can join, about the ways that they've learned to become successful and engaged at the college. It's a very, very difficult time for all of us in the profession and for the students. But what we keep saying to our students is that, you know, they have incredible support on our campus from many different offices, not just the international office, and that for us as professionals, this just makes our job much more important now to forge ahead.
Raj, you don't work with the university in that capacity, but what would you suggest to a student who, let's say, runs into a situation where they feel either unsafe or they felt they were targeted by someone? What would be your advice to a student who's coming from overseas in terms of how confident they should feel in approaching a university?
Yeah, I would say first, the International Center in every university, there's a great resource to go to, because there are school staff available, there are other students who might be like you, and they're actually US students over there who want to see international students successful. The other part I wanted to mention is we have been mostly talking about students from outside the US coming here. The part of the program where I teach, we actually go out to different countries. So in June, I'll be going out to Singapore, and I'm going to be teaching a 2-week design thinking course there. And the last thing I want to mention is, keep in mind, US students who are studying here and who've grown up here are very eager to go to other countries. So I think people at large are very, very open to get students from all over the world, and they want to reach out and be in their countries and immerse with them in that experience.
James, I actually want to ask you a little bit more about the procedure as well. If a student in any way feels unsafe or if they have either been physically or verbally assaulted, what is the general procedure that universities follow to ensure that this kind of a complaint is dealt with, and also students in general feel safe even about their physical surroundings?
Well, each institution will have a particular office that is designated by the administration to be the place that that has the duty to investigate any sort of harassment or any issue that, or hate crime or thing of that nature. So, and particularly in general, administrators and hopefully the faculty have had some training in understanding how this process works, or at least they know where to refer the students. And so then that office in general will investigate that particular issue. It may involve also including the campus police, depending on what the particular issue is. And also there will be a lot of offices that will go through some variety of a program that shows them, and they can have stickers that is on their front doors that says this is a safe place, or some wording to that effect, so that students can understand that that office is a place for them to be particularly welcoming, and that is available to them for whatever support they would need. And then obviously, and the international office would be the one of the places that would be the place that a student could come to report any issue or to get support. And then depending on what is the best place, certainly the first contact would be for that office to get in touch with that other office that would investigate this, but also would work with that student to see if that student needs to have counseling support. All universities have some variation of a counseling center through their health services, or separately as a counseling center. So anytime a student has these sort of issues, they are taken very seriously, and the universities want to make sure that they deal with those issues up front and as quickly as possible.
All right, we have one more question on the floor. Please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Ahmed Asheri, a grad student at George Washington University. We hear a lot about encouraging international students to get out of their comfort zone and to get to know domestic people and to experience the American life. Why shouldn't we encourage domestic students to get to know international students?
All right, Paul.
So your question is, why should
why should the burden be on international students to get out of their comfort zone? Why shouldn't there also be this burden
Well, I
on
think it should go
domestic
both
students?
ways, frankly. I think it should go both ways, and I think the benefit should go both ways. If you do go outside your comfort zone, then perhaps you'll, for instance, I'm not sure how much English you use back in your home country, but you're obviously using it here for your studies. But I think you'll become much more facile if you have conversations that aren't just academic in nature, but about the weather, about what to do Saturday night, or going to movies and so forth. So it can benefit you, but I think it also helps to educate the domestic student, the U.S. citizen and the permanent resident, who then will learn that, hey, I have nothing to fear. I'm dealing with a wonderful individual here. So I think the benefit really does go both ways.
Doug, I actually want to take that question one step further. International student orientations are done separately from the domestic student orientations. Why is that the case? And then are domestic students during their orientation told about international students and what they can do to not just reach out, but to also learn about other cultures that they can find on the campus?
Well, so international students have some particular needs, and we want to make sure that we're responding to them. Orientation might be a great vehicle to engage domestic students about the topic of international students more broadly, but we find that there needs to be some sort of specific mechanism, right? So if we can provide programming, which we're striving to do, that engages international students particularly in a way that gives them something to offer, in conversation with domestic students, our hope is that will attract more domestic students into a thick conversation with them. Orientation is an opportunity, but it's only one of a great many.
Mm-hmm. Bianca, please go ahead.
Part of the issue sometimes is that the timing is very different. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes for domestic students, their orientation happens during the whole summer, and they come in and get that orientation, whereas for the international students, theirs is generally that week before classes start. So it does make it a little more difficult to integrate them and have them work together, but there are ways to do that, and many institutions are working to do that.
All right, we'll move to a taped question, and then Bianca, I'll come back to you with my question about community colleges. Let's see what this prospective international student wanted to find out.
I saw that a lot of good activities posted on VOA Lao Facebook page. So I would like to ask, what can I do in order to get scholarship to pursue my education in the U.S.?
Shout out to our VOA Lao service. What can students do to get scholarships? Bianca, do community colleges offer scholarships?
There are a few that I'm aware that do offer scholarships, but mainly majority of the scholarships come after the student is enrolled in school. So then that way they're able to build on top of their resume and their portfolio. Also, there's more options once you're in the United States. I also want to build upon the question the gentleman had earlier. I wear two hats. I work with international students and study abroad. Because our domestic students fall in love with our international community and we're really pushing a global environment, so many are coming to me stating they want to study abroad. So it's that they want to be immersed just the same way that you have immersed yourself here in the United States.
And health is also a really important part of your life in general, but also your campus life in the U.S. And one of the things that a lot of universities ask for are vaccination records. And it's part of the application process, and especially when you come here, that's looked at. Why is that so important, Sam? And also, if, Paul, I'm sorry, why is that important, Paul? And also, if a student doesn't have that record, what is their option? What can they do?
Well, all of our students have to demonstrate that they've had vaccinations. Obviously, at a school of medicine, they're going to have, at some point, patient interaction. So if they haven't had them, they will, in their home countries or in their states, they have to have them once they arrive. But we make sure that everyone is kept healthy so that our patients are kept healthy. Right? But it's really just to protect you as much as the patients.
One last quick question, Raja. I want you to give a very brief answer. A lot of students that we talked to said that one thing that they would have liked to know before coming here was financial management, and also realizing that as the exchange rate changes, sometimes their financial situation can really change. So if you could just give us brief advice on what are some of the key factors to look at in your financial management as a student.
Yeah, so I would say, think about what are your fixed expenses and what are your optional or discretionary expenses. So whatever is tuition, you don't have much of a choice. But where are you going to live? And then how do you spend money beyond that? And I would say think about where you have the flexibility and where you are willing to make an adjustment and where you're not.
Great, thank you so much. So look at your means and plan accordingly. 90 minutes fly by really, really fast when you have a lot of good questions and experts who know what they're talking about. I'm so glad that Voice of America was able to do this. A huge thank you to all our panelists who shared their time and their expertise with us. Also, thank you to our audience that posed their questions here. To our online audience, thank you so much for sending us great questions from different parts of the world. And last but not the least, of course, a huge thank you to George Washington University for giving us this beautiful, beautiful space and for partnering with Voice of America in talking to international students all over the world. Thank you very much for joining us. The conversation will continue on facebook.com/Voice Voice of America, and you can also tweet us at VOA News. Talk to us. We're listening, and we will try to get answers to your questions. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
It's definitely so much different, and I miss Asian food so much. And even though if you go to an Asian restaurant, they don't cook as authentic as I get in Beijing.
What do you miss most about
Food.